Taft College is in a little oil country, or little oil county, about 30 miles outside of Bakersfield. So, and then you're going to say, where's Bakersfield? Bakersfield is in the valley between Los Angeles and Fresno. So we're in a little small town. We have around 5,000 students that attend our campus, and we offer face-to-face classes and a lot of distant ed at our campus. Thank you for asking. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Tina Mendoza. I will be presenting on Taft College's SLOs and our new implemented Canvas shell to utilize the collection of, shared conversations regarding SLOs. We're currently in a really unique spot at Taft College. We were lucky enough to get a board policy written where we spend a complete day where we just focus on student learning outcomes. I know a lot of campuses don't have this, but we were able to write board policy, get it approved, and they gave us a whole day to just do learning outcomes. And I'm going to give a little bit of background. And then after I give some background, like I said, I'm going to share my Canvas shell so that everybody has a look at what we're doing. And then at any time during the presentation, feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand. I don't want to talk the whole time, but I'm happy to answer questions as we're going along. So Professor Vicki Jacoby was our previous learning outcome coordinator at Taft College, and she wrote part of this PowerPoint, so I want to make sure I give her credit for it, and then I wrote also some of it. Well, maybe not. I'm not going to be able to. There we go. So historically, what happened with Taft College was we got dinged by ACC-JC in 2014. And in 2015, our self-evaluation was standard 2. So we had to figure out how to collect learning outcomes, which a lot of campuses in a few years ago were having issues on where do we collect the data. I know a lot of campuses use different platforms to collect their SLO data. When we got put on standard 2, we went ahead and purchased eLumen. So we are using eLumen at Taft College, and our learning outcomes weren't being effectively collected, and nor were we having really good conversations about the learning outcomes. So the IEPI is finding, we had an IEPI grant, and then this is where our policy went to the board. So the SLO committee worked on procedures. So we do have procedures that are outlined in our handbook. And then we did have a handbook written in 2016. I will say this about our 2016 handbook. It has a lot of great ideas. It put a lot of things in motion for us to collect data. However, there wasn't much accountability after we did the guidebook to ensure we were following all the things that we said we were going to do. So now, once we got the board policy completed in 2016, every in-service at the beginning of fall semester and spring semester, we put aside an SLO day. And our SLO day varies. At the beginning, it was just about how to write an SLO, and we had various conversations on what is a learning outcome and what is just an objective. And then we also had a lot of conversations regarding how do we measure them, assessments, are we going to use rubrics, how do you know if a student actually completed the outcome. And we had a lot of conversations that we're still having, how many outcomes should we have within one course? Should there be 1? Should there be 6? So when Professor Jacoby took over and we wrote the handbook back in 2016, every course that we had was told to have 1 outcome. So from 2016 to the present, many of our courses just have one student outcome. And then at the bottom where it says in-service day, we did start practicing that back in 2016, and we still continue to have an SLO day. This is just a policy so that you could see what we were able to write and the policies we followed to get SLO day. And I'm going to share my PowerPoint and give it to for upload in case you want to do that. Yeah, for the comment from Lisa, we are currently, and I'm going to talk about that right now, we are currently in the process to talk about curriculum and catalog. So later on, hopefully you'll share out your experience with that, because we're looking at purchasing the curriculum portion and the catalog. Right now, we're only using eLumen for SLO collection. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have? Again, I'm not expecting you to read this because I broke it down. This was the board policy: aside one full day during each in-service dedicated to SLOs, in which documented in eLumen or another appropriate data housing system. So when we first started collecting data for our SLO day, it was just about the SLOs. Did they rank 1 to 5, right? They passed or they didn't pass, or it was NA. But we weren't having conversations. A lot of faculty at the beginning were just doing the SLOs to check a box. They weren't really looking at the data, and we weren't really assessing it for improving our courses. So this is the part where we're at right now, that we are dedicating the day to identify gaps in outcomes, achievements, and then figure out how this could help with program review. So like I said, we kind of lost our way once we got full accreditation. So we started to, now we're kind of a little bit back more on track. So let's see. So for the SLO coordinators, I put who were the coordinators because Dr. Jacoby was the one who implemented and got eLumen for the campus. We used IEPI money, for those of you in California, to help get us on eLumen, and we had a lot of guest speakers come in, and we used a lot of time and funding from IEPI to ensure we had speakers to help us with rubrics, ensure we had speakers to help us with creating SLOs. Joelle Chayas was the SLO coordinator from 2019 to 2021. And as many of you guys know, that was during COVID. So a lot of things went off track during that period. We were still collecting data on eLumen, but we weren't really having those conversations on what to do with the data, how to improve our courses. So when I took over in 2021, I restructured SLO days. I reached out to the faculty and asked them what they wanted to learn, kind of like with students. When we asked them to have buy-in for our courses, I was reaching out to the faculty so they could have buy-in with SLOs and SLO day. A lot of them felt that it was just checking a box, I have to be here. But I worked really hard in making the day connecting to the material, connecting to a guest speaker, connecting it to Taft College, and connecting it to making those conversations about SLOs that we said we were going to have. So I created a Canvas shell that will house SLO day information. Faculty participate in Discussion Strands. No, they don't like it, but they still do it. Faculty can locate the SLO handbook in the Canvas shell, and it's a quick reference of SLOs that are being evaluated for the semester. So I have information in the SLO shell, what we are evaluating as far as the institution learning outcome within our Canvas shell. So this is kind of a snapshot of what the past SLO days have been for us. In fall, we worked on rewriting our institutional SLOs. I did get some pushback from faculty, but I don't think we were ready to have a conversation on how the institution learning outcomes connect to our mission at our college. And we're I think, in a good space right now where we're starting to have that conversation. In spring 2022, we brought Yarg to Zoom and talked to us about authentic assessment. So he did a really good job, talked to us about rubrics. A lot of faculty enjoyed the conversation and enjoyed the whole idea about what authentic assessment is and how we could utilize it in our courses. And then in fall of 2022, we had Amanda Tainer come. She really brought a lot of information to our campus, because as a campus, we're only collecting student learning outcomes, even though we're supposed to be collecting service area outcomes. So when she came, she really brought to light this conversation of learning outcomes and how her campus used to have a student learning outcome like committee, but instead they just changed it to a learning outcome committee. Therefore, the committee could focus on student learning outcomes in the classroom, but also area outcomes. And I thought that was a really refreshing conversation to have. And she also mentioned how her campus doesn't use eLumen to collect area outcome data. That eLumen wasn't a good fit for using it to collect area outcome data. And that's also something that I'm looking into, because we've been trying to use eLumen for area outcomes, but it's just not doing what we want it to do. So we have been out shopping to figure out how we could collect that data where it will benefit our students. And then in spring, this past spring, 2023, our guest speakers were Lisa and Penny, and they came from Barstow. And we're starting to have conversations with them about using grading rubrics in eLumen, or not in eLumen, in Canvas to tie to eLumen. So a lot of the faculty were excited because of the fact that they could just grade in Canvas and it would automatically dump the data into eLumen. Therefore, the SLOs would already be recorded. A lot of the pushback that I get, or a lot of the conversations that I have, is that I have to redo my learning outcomes and go into eLumen and insert them into another program. Where if it's just in Canvas, faculty would rather go in and click a button and then have that transfer into eLumen. And Lisa and Penny did talk to us about how they're purchasing the curriculum portion of eLumen. So that was something that our campus is now having conversations about. So this is an example of what we did on SLO Day. Faculty worked to input SLOs into eLumen, and then we did step-by-step directions if they needed help. And then we had our guest speakers from 10 to noon. And if you see right here, this is where they would have done the discussion strand. And then we had lunch, and then we did an activity. So our activity this semester was, I gave them all assignments. I gave them a grading rubric, and then I printed out the learning outcome that was in eLumen. And I had different faculty grade from different departments, and they had to evaluate, was the SLO authentic? What was it measuring? And did it connect to the assignment? And then how would they have reported that grade into eLumen? And it was interesting because of the fact that we had math faculty grading essays. And I heard a lot, wow, this is a lot to read. I'm not used to doing this much reading, which is, it's a different type of grading for math. But a lot of the faculty enjoyed the fact that we were, outside of our divisions, outside of our departments, looking at other learning outcomes and looking at other assignments to have conversations on cross-discipline, which is something that we said we were going to do as an institution. And then, of course, after we did the activity, they had to post what they learned or how they found the activity in a discussion strand. And then I have a questions and comments area for faculty. So where are we now? We're editing our institution learning outcomes. We're reviewing our SLO handbook for accuracy. We want to make sure it is reflective of what we're doing on campus. We are also creating a SLO scoring rubric because when I have SLO, SLO meetings and the committee meets, we have a huge conversation on whether this SLO is measurable. So we've looked at other campuses and what rubrics are out there. So the committee is going to actually, for Taft College, create a scoring rubric so that we can move forward SLOs that are approved. We're researching on the connecting Illumin and Canvas for student learning outcomes. We're also researching the purchase of Illumin for curriculum and catalog. And we have had conversations on campus about changing the committee to just a learning outcomes committee. And then we're trying to align SLO review with comprehensive program review. In our handbook, we said we would look at every SLO once it came up for program review, but we're in the middle of doing a 3-year comprehensive program review and annual program reviews. And that just got implemented this semester. So a lot of our SLOs that we haven't been looked at for a few years. And that's something that I'm trying to catch up for accreditation. And then more training on authentic assessment. I think as we move forward, especially after COVID, a lot of faculty are being a little bit more open-minded on authentic assessment and the reporting of outcomes. So I'm going to go ahead. Any questions? I'm going to go ahead and show the Canvas shell. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? No? Okay. So let me share my Canvas shell. I hope this one's it. So this is our Canvas shell that we use for SLO Day. So if you want, I'm trying to move my window. That's not what I want. I'm trying to make the window bigger so I could see it. Okay, so with the Canvas shell, if you look at it right here, this is where I put our assessments. So I have every academic year, this is the cycle that we do when we meet, supposedly on SLO Day, we define what global awareness is, and these are our ILOs. What we're assessing quantitative reasoning for the academic year. We're reviewing critical thinking because that's what we assessed the year before. And we're trying to come up with strategies for improvement of communication. These are all great ways to look at the institution learning outcomes. It's just hard to collect data on if we're actually doing it. And then down here, I put the SLO Day outline on the Canvas page. I put the contact for myself and our Illumin assistant at Taft. I have some important links regarding quick pages, student learning outcomes. And then if you click over here on modules, I basically created a module for each SLO day. And this was our first day when I created, again, I thought in my mind, it would be better to define, assess, review, and implement strategies. So if we look at the first one, I gave the definition, but I also I put faculty in groups and I had them define and give me the people on their group. So you could see how they had the discussion in their group and then what the group posted. And we could see other posts by other faculty. And then if we go to the next, all the way to the bottom, I did have them assess critical thinking. How will they assess critical thinking? They went in here. I gave them the basically the outline on what they should be doing for the outcome. And then here's where we have some rubrics from various faculty across the campus. So this is pretty much what I have been collecting as far as like for me to record conversations. You can see right here, they put their own rubric, but we've had conversations since this first year when I started in fall. When you do an SLO rubric, what data do we report into eLumen? So if you have a rubric that has 100 points, and let's say the student got 90 points or 80 points, but they lost points because of font, they lost points because they didn't turn it in time, are we really collecting the outcome data? Because the outcome for the course is not, can they turn the paper in on time? Can they follow the font? Well, depending on the course, right? If it's English. But the conversation that needs to be had is what part of a grading rubric is authentic for capturing the data within that specific assignment or that course. So we started to have conversations that maybe we were inputting data wrong into eLumen, because at first, a lot of our faculty were just going by the final grade of the class. So if a student got an A, they got a 5 in eLumen. They weren't really looking at a specific assignment and how that assignment reflected into the SLO. So let me see other modules that we have. So that was fall, and this is the past spring. I had them talk about the discussion, and then I had them talk about the activity that we did and answer, like, what did they learn, or how do they understand eLumen, and how the projects, the handouts that they got worked. So that's pretty, oh, and if we go to, sorry, I forgot one thing for the modules. For the modules, in addition to the SLO day, I do have any meeting notes that I received that I could share out with faculty. I also input in here, I think Santa Ana College has some really good SLOs, and I've been doing research on other campuses and just put links for SLO samples. So if a faculty member is writing a new course, they could look at these SLOs for examples. And then I also have one of our faculty members went to training for the Assessment Institute, and they uploaded all of their PowerPoints that they received. And then Friday Talks, I also upload those and the recordings. So with the Canvas page, I'm able to create a space for people that have questions about any training, or if they want to go back and look at recordings. So that's pretty much all that I have. Any questions or comments for me? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
I'm sorry
if I
Andrew. Interrupt. Andrew Wesley from SLO Community College. I just want to thank you. Be honest, I was just in another session where they used Tableau, and I have honestly never felt so inadequate about what I thought I was doing properly, and then apparently it just looked like I had been failing for the past 5 years. But I appreciate, because it seems like finally another college that is at kind of a similar pace as to like we are. We're using eLumen. eLumen does seem to have certain capabilities, but also lack of ability that apparently other programs do. Like Tableau, like I don't even know if we can touch that program. But you know, in eLumen, I think the issue that we have now, I agree with you, faculty. One, it's a cultural thing that you know, trying to get faculty buy-in, right? But I think what you said about that one faculty member who was like, I don't feel like having to go into Lumen and doing the Canvas. The problem that we have, I suppose we all, you know, if you're in a California community college, like we all had to switch to Canvas. You know, Solano was only at 4% online before pandemic happened. And now the idea of going from eventually getting people to do things in eLumen, now then trying to translate that into Canvas, and that's going to be a difficult thing, and I think it's important. But how did you go about, like, did you take like the eLumen training for like Canvas integration, or did did someone like, how did you learn how to actually create the connectivity issues? You know, I mean, because that's the big thing. Like, you have to be able to connect Canvas to a Lumen, and it's
Yeah,
not like, oh, here's a button, just do it.
yeah.
Um,
There,
so
there's
how
there's
did you
not
get to that
yeah.
point where you were like, okay, cool, now that we got a Lumen, but we're also using Canvas, let's make it easier for faculty.
Oh, yeah,
And
we have that. So the reason, and we haven't done it. We're still in conversation.
okay.
We have a specialist in IT who is Illumin trained.
Ah,
So she does all the Illumin work.
okay.
And I just reached out to Barstow, like I mentioned, Penny and Lisa came to our campus. They just purchased the connection between Canvas and Illumin. So
Okay.
they were showing us how it worked for their institution.
First.
And from what I understand is you have to have rubrics in Canvas for everything that you're going to connect to Illumin. So it has to be a connection. So faculty that don't use rubrics and they want to use Canvas, they're going to have to create rubrics.
Okay. And so it is another add-on, because I know a lot of these things, people are like, oh, we're buying a Lumen, but it's not like every different component is a Lumen is an add-on. So that
Yeah,
connection is another add-on that we will have to
yeah.
purchase.
And see,
Okay.
right now we had issues with Illumin 2 semesters ago because of the way we do the data upload from Banner into
Yeah.
Illumin,
Oh, I'm with you.
and we didn't have a patch for something,
Yep.
and we couldn't see our students in Illumin. It was a
Okay.
horrible semester. Everybody was up in arms. But I will tell you this: the faculty are barely starting to have buy-in, because I heard when Illumin, or not Illumin, but Canvas mentioned that it could connect to Illumin, there were a lot of problems.
Mhm.
And campuses that started it reported a lot of problems. I think a lot of those kinks have been worked out by now, and we're barely starting to have that conversation.
Okay.
I would recommend, Andrew, that you reach out to Barstow.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, Barstow. I love the fact that I think it's Penny. It was either Penny or Lisa, but Penny said that she broke Illumin, like because of the way she did it. She put it in backwards, and they can't undo what she did.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
and I love people when they're authentic and not just saying this is what's great, but this is what's also wrong.
Yes.
But I will tell you what they did mention was that when you have the curriculum in Illumin,
Mhm.
that you can, when you set up your Canvas shells, that Canvas will pull the SLOs from curriculum directly
Cool.
into the Canvas
Okay.
shell.
Because we have all of the, I think we have our when we switched over, because we had CurriculNet Meta, if you remember that nightmare. So we switched over in 2019 to Illumin,
Yeah,
and we just purchased pretty much everything that we could.
yeah,
And yeah, and anyone who deals with Illumin on the back end realizes you can break it
yeah.
kind of easily, and then they're like, well, it's, and then the answer they always give, well, that's the coding. I'm like, but you could change the coding. But okay, whatever.
Yeah, and everything, and I agree. As somebody just put in the chat, everything costs more money. You
Yeah.
are correct. That's why myself and somebody else on the SLO committee are currently writing an IEPI grant
Mhm.
to see if we could get an IEPI team in to help us with maybe purchasing that the curriculum and the catalog to see if the interface with the Illumin would work for our campus.
Because I can say the curriculum module is fantastic in Illumin.
Yeah, I've seen it
And
at other
we've had headaches
institutions.
with the actual assessment, which is my role. That component has had some headaches, especially how you set up
Yeah,
assessments. We've had data retrieval issues, but yeah, no, the curriculum part is fantastic. And
so
I think we're
reach
switching
out.
over to catalog too.
Yeah, reach out if you have questions. My email, you can find me in Taft College.
Okay.
I'm always available. We could Zoom or chat.
That's great. I appreciate you, Tina.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to answer, before I call on Barbara, I'm going to answer a couple of questions. We have just had conversations about ILO rubrics because right now we're in the process of rewriting them. We want to make sure that our institutional learning outcomes match what we do on campus. So that's for Nancy's question. Yes, we are trying to find rubrics for that. And Cheryl, you're right. Everything costs a lot of money. And somebody asked me about what is the participation rate for SLO Day. Well, it is a day of in-service that is required. by our district. So if you don't attend, you have to take P&L time. So I normally have 100% of faculty unless they want to take a P&L day. It is district required. And I do get pushback on it, but I will say this, we wrote it in the academic senate. We sent it to the board and the board approved it. So I do tell faculty if they don't want SLO day, they can rewrite board policy as academic senate and we can go through the whole thing if we want to get rid of it. But right now it is board policy, so everybody has to attend. Barbara.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I saw you had on the Canvas shell mentioned something about SLO Fridays. I don't know if I missed that, if you talked about that.
So Yarick does SLO Friday talks, and you get it. I normally get an email as an SLO coordinator every Friday talk, and it goes from, I want to say like 9 to noon sometimes, and there are recordings now. So you might be able to reach out to Yarick for the recordings, but every Friday has a different talk. So they talk about assessment, they talk about rubrics, pretty much everything that deals with SLOs. Oh, Cheryl's saying they're on YouTube, so you might be able to find them on YouTube. I haven't got one for this semester, but I know I've seen them for the past 2 semesters. Mary, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I have so many questions because I'm in the process now. We've spent 2 years implementing Illumin for curriculum, and we're still not really back to where we were with our curriculum process yet. My job is to implement the assessment side. And I just wondered a few thousand things like, did you start off with collective assessments in Illumin, or did you go straight to the scorecards?
We went straight to the scorecards.
And that was to get disaggregated data.
And the problem with the problem for us, and this is just my personal opinion with the scorecards, especially after COVID, our classes are so small. So like if you have a class of 6, the data gets really jumbled because the classes are so small. We really can't get good data. We are thinking of making it a larger sample. So just to let you know, we're having that conversation.
Okay, thank you. And then I know there's a couple of different ways of doing it in Illumin. One way is you can have one assessment throughout the college. Have you tried that at all? Or do you have each department doing making their own assessment rubric?
So for our assessments, right now we have every course, like for history has a rubric that is specific for our division, and we all use the same rubric that is in Illumin, and then that gets mapped up. So it gets mapped up through Illumin to the program and to the ILO. I don't know how the mapping works. That's something that's behind the scene. But we haven't regulated rubrics for all of the departments on campus. So I saw some other departments rubrics, and they're very simple, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it doesn't really have any information. So we're in the process right now, because we're talking about going to connect Canvas to Illumin, how important the rubrics are and how detailed they need to be. So like the history rubrics that we have, it says exceeded, beyond, utilize this. So it's very detailed, but some of the other rubrics across the campus are just very generic.
Okay, that's very good to know. Thank you. And thank you for reminding me of how powerful Canvas Shell can be for disseminating information, collecting, and all of that. I have used it and set it up for Academic Senate and for my own CIS department. It just never dawned on me. So thank you so much. I appreciated that part.
Oh, no, thank you. I will tell you that the faculty were some were really happy and some were upset because now they have another Canvas shell. But I'm like, it's a one-stop shop. Everything is there. And for accreditation, we can prove that we're having conversations because there's writing in the discussions. So that was one of my goals, to have data. So when accreditation does come, and if they ask us if we're having cross-discipline conversations, I have it somewhere where I'm not trying to go back and look for data. So, okay, I have a couple of people in the chat. Let me see. Course for data, faculty also complete the self-reflection. Yeah, we don't have, we have the end of the term assessment for each course. So even though there's 2 historians, each of us, and let's say we both teach early US history, we both score each student individually. And we do have a like reflection in eLumen. It says what if, and like, what would you change? So you do have to type a reflection after you put in the individual scorecards within eLumen. So everybody does grade at our campus at the end of the semester, each student. Was there any other questions? I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anything. What are the state SLO meetings in California? I already answered that. We have, I don't know if they have larger. I know everything I get is from Yarrick. He does the Friday talks, but I don't know if they have like a statewide SLO. And I have to give 100% credit to Yarrick because he has pulled the SLO committee together and the SLO community together in California. He has done a lot of work at the beginning with no pay. And I will say for our campus, I am the SLO coordinator. I am at 50% release time in order to accomplish my position, because as SLO coordinator, I have to sit on tech review. I have to sit on curriculum. I'm part of governance council, and I'm also part of SPC. And I'm part of like 8 different committees that I have to go to as SLO coordinator in order to give data. Any other questions? Well, if not, that's all that I have. If you want to jump in another presentation, I'll hang out. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to chat. Thank you for attending. I'm so excited that people came to hear my talk. I thought like 2 people would come. But it's very exciting. And if anybody has questions, I am on Taft College website. So just Google me and send me an email. I'm happy to share any information that I have.